Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. Horror Night. Genoa City is about to reel in shock as Nikki Newman, the once unshakable matriarch of the Newman Empire, finds herself in the center of a tragedy so dark and devastating that the city may never be the same. Fans who have followed Nikki's journey from her turbulent early days with Victor to her ongoing battle with sobriety know that every step she takes is scrutinized, every misstep magnified. But nothing could prepare anyone for what happened this fateful night. The evening began innocuously enough. Nikki had agreed to attend a charity gala hosted at Society, a high-profile event meant to bolster Newman Enterprises' public image after a series of financial setbacks. She was dressed in one of her iconic shimmering gowns, hair perfectly styled, but beneath the confident exterior, the old vulnerabilities she had fought so hard to suppress were bubbling dangerously close to the surface. The pressures of her marriage to Victor, whose manipulative tendencies had never waned, coupled with whispers of corporate sabotage against the Newman legacy, weighed heavily on her. Add to that the creeping self-doubt that comes with decades of being a public figure in Genoa City, and it was a volatile cocktail waiting for the slightest spark. Unfortunately, that spark came in the form of an unexpected confrontation. Victor, relentless as ever, had shown up at Society unannounced, accompanied by whispers of a shocking new business maneuver that threatened both Nikki's personal and professional standing. His presence ignited old fears, and in a moment of impulsive desperation, Nikki reached for a glass of champagne. One glass led to another, and before anyone could intervene, the confident, poised woman who had stood tall through every scandal and heartbreak was teetering dangerously on the edge of sobriety. Her friends, including loyal confidants like Phyllis and Sally, noticed the change in her demeanor, her speech slightly slurred, her usually sharp eyes clouded with confusion, but no one could have predicted the chain of events that was about to unfold. As the gala ended, Nikki insisted on driving herself home, despite desperate pleas from those around her. "I'll be fine," she insisted, though the quaver in her voice betrayed her. She stumbled into her sleek black car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, heart racing with a mix of fear and defiance. The night was dark, the streets slick with the remnants of a light rain, and the city lights blurred through her tear-filled eyes. Nikki's driving, normally precise and confident, was now erratic, a dangerous dance between control and chaos. Moments later, a catastrophic turn of events occurred that would forever haunt the halls of Genoa City. Nikki lost control at a crucial intersection. Screeching tires, blaring horns, the world a dizzying spin of headlights and panic. In a matter of seconds, the unthinkable happened. Nikki's car struck a pedestrian crossing the street. The scene unfolded in horrifying slow motion, the impact, the cry of onlookers, and the sudden, grim silence that followed. Emergency sirens blared in the distance as witnesses scrambled to provide aid. The person Nikki had hit, a young woman named Claire, a talented up-and-coming architect who had recently moved to Genoa City with bright dreams, was pronounced dead at the scene. The city was in shock. Genoa City, accustomed to drama and scandal, was not prepared for a tragedy of this magnitude involving one of its most beloved figures. Panic gripped Nikki as she stumbled from the car, her hands trembling uncontrollably, her mind a whirl of guilt and disbelief. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself, tears streaming down her face as the horrific reality set in. Bystanders called 911, and paramedics arrived swiftly, but Nikki was not merely emotionally shattered, her body had suffered in the accident too. She was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, surrounded by flashing lights and the frantic voices of EMTs. Emergency surgery was required to stabilize her after a serious injury sustained when her vehicle collided with the curb moments after hitting Claire. As she was wheeled into the ER, doctors and nurses worked frantically, performing procedures that would save her life but do nothing to repair the guilt that now consumed her. The media, always quick to descend upon any Newman-related scandal, quickly caught wind of the story. Social media erupted as eyewitness accounts circulated, describing Nikki's panic and the devastation at the scene. The hashtags began trending within hours, #NikkiNewmanCrash, #GenoaCityTragedy, #DrunkDrivingDisaster. Fans were horrified, torn between disbelief and sympathy, as images of the accident scene flooded the internet, and news anchors speculated endlessly about Nikki's state of mind. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Victor arrived, his usual facade of control replaced by visible anxiety. He confronted Nikki in the sterile, brightly lit emergency room, the weight of the incident pressing down on both of them. "Nikki, what were you thinking?" Victor demanded, his voice a mixture of fear, anger, and genuine concern. Nikki, barely able to speak through her sobs, could only shake her head. She felt the crushing weight of her actions, the knowledge that one moment of poor judgment had irreversibly changed lives, both hers and Claire's. The doctors, while working to save her, informed Victor that Nikki's blood alcohol level was dangerously high, confirming everyone's worst fears: she had been driving drunk. The news spread like wildfire, igniting debates across Genoa City about responsibility, forgiveness, and the fragility of life. Friends and family members gathered at the hospital, some in tears, others in shock, each processing the event in their own way. Phyllis, for instance, clutched Nikki's hand, whispering frantic reassurances while secretly fearing the wrath of the public and the legal consequences that loomed over Nikki like a dark cloud. Meanwhile, the Newman family attorneys began strategizing, aware that the incident would soon evolve into a legal nightmare. Charges of vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence were inevitable, and the family's reputation hung by a fragile thread. Yet, amidst the chaos, there were moments of raw human emotion that no law could contain. Nikki's friends took turns holding her hand, offering comfort as she oscillated between inconsolable grief for Claire and the fear of her own fate. Her mind replayed the accident over and over, the sight of Claire, the sound of the collision, the realization that a life had been taken. The tragedy extended beyond the immediate victim. Claire's family, understandably devastated, demanded justice, while Genoa City's citizens were left to grapple with the fact that one of their most iconic figures had been involved in such a horrific event. Rumors began swirling about Nikki's sobriety and whether she had truly been as stable as she claimed. Some defended her, citing her decades-long battle with alcohol and the tremendous progress she had made, while others expressed anger and disbelief, unable to reconcile the beloved Nikki Newman with the woman who caused Claire's death. The legal proceedings promised to be lengthy and harrowing. The city's top attorneys prepared for a high-profile case that would dominate headlines for months. Prosecutors would argue recklessness and negligence, while Nikki's defense would likely highlight her previously clean record and the extraordinary pressures she had faced that night. Public opinion was divided, with fans flooding talk shows, social media, and forums with passionate arguments both condemning and defending her actions. Inside the hospital, Nikki remained under close observation. Doctors ensured she remained physically stable, but the emotional wounds were far deeper than any injury could reach. Psychiatric evaluation was recommended, not just as a formality but as a genuine measure to help Nikki process the trauma she had caused. Night after night, she lay in the sterile hospital room, haunted by flashbacks of Claire and the irrevocable consequences of one reckless decision. The grief, compounded by the guilt and the fear of legal repercussions, threatened to consume her. Even Victor, usually the epitome of composure and control, was shaken. He realized that nothing in their wealth, power, or influence could undo the tragedy, and that the shadow of this event would linger over the Newman legacy indefinitely. Genoa City's media coverage intensified. Every outlet ran detailed accounts of the accident, each with photos and speculative commentary. Talk shows debated Nikki's moral and legal culpability, while tabloids sensationalized every minute detail. The public's fascination bordered on obsession, with hashtags, opinion pieces, and social media debates keeping the story in the forefront of city consciousness. Meanwhile, Nikki's friends and family had to navigate a minefield of emotions. Sharon, always empathetic but fiercely protective, tried to shield Nikki from the worst of the media frenzy while helping her confront the reality of her actions. Jack Abbott, ever the pragmatist, focused on managing the fallout for Newman Enterprises, understanding that the family's public image could collapse under the weight of scandal. Chelsea Lawson, despite her own complicated history with the Newmans, reached out in support, emphasizing the importance of emotional recovery before legal battles. Through it all, Nikki faced herself. Each day in the hospital, she wrestled with profound questions of identity, morality, and self-worth. How could one moment destroy so much? How could she reconcile the woman who had fought to build a family and a legacy with the woman responsible for taking a life? The nights were the hardest, the silence of her hospital room amplifying her guilt and regret. Tears flowed freely, punctuated by whispered apologies to a universe that seemed impossibly indifferent. Yet, in the midst of tragedy, moments of human connection offered glimmers of hope. Nurses held her hand during particularly difficult moments, offering compassion without judgment. Friends visited despite the public scrutiny, demonstrating loyalty and love even when fear of association could have driven them away. These small gestures reminded Nikki that even in the darkest moments, she was not alone. The city outside continued its restless pulse. Genoa City was never quiet for long, and as news of the accident spread, it seemed as though the world had paused momentarily, collectively gasping at the horror. But life, relentless as ever, continued. Legal experts predicted a high-profile trial, while the Newman family scrambled to manage both internal turmoil and external perception. Every day brought a new wave of media coverage, speculation about settlements, and debates about responsibility and redemption. For Nikki, the road ahead was uncertain. She faced not only potential jail time but the daunting task of reconciling her actions with the person she wanted to be. Each conversation with her attorneys, each news report, each visit from a friend or family member forced her to confront a reality she had never imagined, that one night, one choice, could unravel decades of stability and hard work. In those hospital halls, amid the beeping monitors and whispered consolations, Nikki Newman began a new chapter, not one of wealth, power, or public acclaim, but one of reckoning, grief, and the faintest glimmer of hope that redemption, however difficult, might still be possible. Horror night had arrived in Genoa City, leaving destruction, heartbreak, and questions that would linger long after the sirens faded and the headlines ran their course. Nikki's drunk driving accident had transformed from a personal failure into a public tragedy, touching lives far beyond her own, and proving in the harshest terms that even the strongest among us are vulnerable to moments of human weakness. As the city struggled to process the events, one thing became clear: nothing, and no one, would ever be the same again. From the shattering loss of Claire to the fracturing of trust and innocence in the hearts of all who witnessed the aftermath, Genoa City was forever changed. Nikki, hospitalized, trembling, and haunted, faced the monumental challenge of rebuilding her life, her conscience, and her shattered reputation, all while the echoes of horror night reverberated through every street, every home, and every heart in the city she had long called her own. As Nikki lay in the stark, white hospital room, the fluorescent lights casting a cold glow over her pale, tear-streaked face, the weight of what had happened began to fully settle in. She had survived the accident physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and morally, she was in pieces. The image of Claire, vibrant, young, full of life, lying motionless after Nikki's reckless actions haunted her every thought. Even in brief moments of unconsciousness following emergency surgery, Nikki's dreams were invaded by the sound of tires screeching, the flash of headlights, and the sudden, awful silence after the impact. Each memory replayed with vivid cruelty, forcing her to confront a reality she could not deny: she had caused a death. And the guilt, suffocating and relentless, pressed down on her chest like a physical weight. Victor Newman arrived at the hospital shortly after Nikki was stabilized, a storm of concern, anger, and disbelief swirling within him. He strode into her room, his signature black suit and stern demeanor doing little to mask the fear in his eyes. He had always been the man in control, the one who manipulated the world around him with precision and power, but tonight, standing by Nikki's hospital bed, he felt helpless in a way he had rarely experienced. "Nikki, how could you?" he demanded, his voice trembling slightly despite the anger he tried to project. His words were both accusatory and desperate, reflecting the complex mix of love, frustration, and fear that had defined their decades-long marriage. Nikki, barely able to form coherent words, shook her head, tears falling freely. "Victor. I didn't mean to, it was an accident," she whispered, her voice breaking under the strain of grief and shame. Victor's hands clenched at his sides, the rage and despair fighting for dominance within him. He knew the world would never forgive this, and that even the powerful Newman name could not shield Nikki from the fallout. Yet beneath it all, he could see her devastation, the raw, human fear that she might never forgive herself. The news of the accident spread like wildfire across Genoa City. Within hours, every major media outlet had picked up the story. Headlines screamed about the drunk driving disaster, about Nikki Newman, the glamorous, influential, seemingly untouchable matriarch, being involved in a fatal accident. Social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Nikki Newman crash, hashtag Genoa City tragedy, and hashtag drunk driving disaster trended within hours. Public opinion was fiercely divided. Some sympathized with Nikki, recognizing her decades-long battle with alcoholism and her history of striving to stay sober. Others were outraged, unable to reconcile the woman they admired with the actions that had ended a young life. Debate shows aired special segments dissecting the accident, panelists speculating on Nikki's mental state, the pressure she faced, and the legal consequences she would inevitably confront. Genoa City, already no stranger to scandal, was shaken to its core. Inside the hospital, Nikki's friends and family began to trickle in. Phyllis, who had always shared a complicated but deep bond with Nikki, was among the first. Her face pale with worry, Phyllis held Nikki's hand tightly, whispering reassurances that felt almost futile against the enormity of the situation. "We'll get through this, Nikki," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. "You have people who love you. We'll figure it out, somehow." Nikki, tears streaming down her cheeks, clung to Phyllis's hand, the warmth offering a tiny lifeline amidst the storm of guilt and fear. Moments later, Sharon arrived, her own expression a mix of horror and empathy. Sharon had always been fiercely protective of the Newmans, particularly Nikki, and though she struggled with the enormity of the situation, she refused to let Nikki face it alone. "Nikki, listen to me," Sharon said firmly, holding her friend's shoulders. "You didn't do this on purpose. We'll get through it. Right now, you need to focus on getting better. Everything else, we'll face it together." Despite Sharon's comforting words, Nikki's mind remained a whirlwind of panic. She could not escape the image of Claire, the sound of the impact, the screams of witnesses. Every heartbeat felt like a reminder of her failure. Victor, meanwhile, had left the room to make arrangements with the Newman family attorneys. Legal experts quickly assessed the situation, realizing that Nikki would likely face multiple charges: vehicular manslaughter, driving under the influence, and reckless endangerment. The stakes were higher than any scandal the Newman family had faced in decades. Jack Abbott, always the calculating adversary, had caught wind of the situation almost immediately. True to form, he recognized the potential damage to the Newmans' empire and was preparing a strategic plan to leverage the chaos for his own advantage. But even Jack, known for his ruthless pragmatism, was unsettled by the sheer tragedy of the event. Claire's family, devastated and grief-stricken, was preparing to pursue justice, making it clear that forgiveness would be no simple matter. As the hours passed, Nikki's physical condition began to stabilize, but her emotional and psychological state deteriorated. The hospital staff, recognizing the severity of her trauma, recommended immediate counseling and psychiatric evaluation. Nikki, always fiercely independent, resisted at first, overwhelmed by shame and the fear of judgment. But Phyllis and Sharon insisted, emphasizing the importance of facing her guilt constructively, not destructively. "You have to deal with this head-on," Phyllis said firmly. "It's the only way you can begin to survive this, and maybe, eventually, forgive yourself." Nikki nodded silently, realizing the truth in her friend's words, though the path ahead seemed impossibly dark. Meanwhile, the city outside was in uproar. News vans lined the streets outside the hospital, reporters vying for every detail, cameras flashing at any glimpse of the Newman family. Social media was flooded with theories, opinions, and speculations, some sympathetic, many vicious. Genoa City's citizens, already accustomed to drama, found themselves grappling with the reality that this was no ordinary scandal, it was a tragedy that had claimed a life. The moral debates were relentless. Was Nikki redeemable? Could she ever face justice and public forgiveness? Could someone with her history of addiction truly be trusted behind the wheel again? Every conversation, every headline, seemed to intensify the scrutiny and pressure surrounding Nikki, compounding her feelings of despair. Back in the hospital room, the tension between Victor and Nikki remained palpable. Victor, struggling to reconcile his fear, anger, and love, paced the room. "Nikki, we need to think about what comes next," he said, voice tight. "The police, the media, the lawsuits. We have to be smart. You can't face this alone." Nikki, fragile and guilt-ridden, could barely meet his gaze. I can't believe I did this," she whispered. Her voice cracked under the weight of remorse. Victor, softened by the visible anguish on her face, reached out, resting a hand gently on hers. "We'll face it together," he said quietly.